Shabbat Shalom. Wait, Shabbat Shalom. We can't define how good it is to sing with you on this Ima together with our fully vaccinated clergy and accompanists, our wonderful pianist and conductor Pete Manfredi joins us tonight. We're here in the sanctuary with our facilities director Tim Wagner and one of our amazing custodial staff members, Luis Vera. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, congregation, joining us via the wondrous internet. This will be, please God, the last Shabbat that we lead live or without an in-person congregation joining us starting a week from tonight. WRT has made plans to welcome you back in safe, equitable, and limited numbers, but with great joy and great togetherness. So we are here tonight on a Shabbat that is specially designated each and every year as Chai Society Shabbat. I'm going to talk a lot more about the meaning of Chai, but it's important for us to know that Chai has a numerical value, like every word constructed of Hebrew letters. So Chai equals 18, as you probably know. And that way, we are able to acknowledge and bless and thank all the people who have affiliated with Westchester Reform Temple for 18 years and more. Now, this is a much deferred service that we intend to hold way back in fall of 2020. Here in the spring of 2021, still very much affected by the pandemic. But we are grateful to welcome tonight and inaugurate the Chai Society class of 2002. That is to say, people who joined the temple in 2002 belong to our congregation for more than 18 years, as well as all of the members of WRT who are double Chai and even triple Chai, going back to our founding generation, all the way back to 1953, when the congregation was first chartered. And yes, we still have members of the congregation who joined and have been with us ever since 1953. I want to extend on behalf of Karen Kleinman and myself, and also Rabbi Levy, who's running our Zoom behind the scenes tonight, a heartfelt word of gratitude to our Chai Society chairs, to Joanne Citron, Barbara Moss, Jane Roberts, Charlotte Siegel, and Steve Siegel, who each year expend such joyful energy in bringing together our community for this celebratory Chai Society celebration of Shabbat. It's also a celebratory weekend for our congregants Zachary Kirshner and Julie Scheffler and their families. Tomorrow morning, Julie will be called forward to the Torah on this very bima as a bat mitzvah, and Zachary in the afternoon as bar mitzvah. And I believe that Julie and her family are joining us from their home to light Shabbat candles with us as we invite you to kindle these lights for Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehaditer shel Shabbat. Julie, we see you. We want to extend the heartfelt mazal tov of our entire WRT family to you, to your parents and grandparents, loved ones, to your sisters. We can't wait to celebrate with you on Bima tomorrow. We're so happy you can join us and add light to our Shabbat celebration.
We'll continue now welcoming Shabbat with the words of Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Aleinu, B'Yimeh Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
I'm very excited. Tomorrow will be the first wedding that I get to conduct in person in well over a year. So I know that this spring is the season of many a bride and groom who had to delay, in some cases, delay many times the much anticipated moment when they would stand together on the chuppah to declare their love and be blessed by their loved ones. I'm so happy that we get to share that experience with our congregant Rachel Ferber and her loved ones tomorrow night, and her bride and groom, David Sternheim, Mazel Tov to Rachel and David and all of their family members. Let us create a spiritual wedding, each in our own way, in our own spaces. The Chag will be the song that welcomes the Sabbath bride. We join together. So there's a line from the Christian liturgy that acknowledges in the midst of life, we are in death. I've heard this uttered at masses, funerals, and it's an acknowledgement that we are all participating in a sacred dance, a flowing rhythm that all things obey, a dance between life and death, joined in lockstep. And yet as I walk outside today, amidst so much sadness and so much death that has consumed every mind's attention, every heart's weight, and every headline for the last 14 months and more, I felt the world coming alive. I took a walk with members of our congregation today. It's become my new favorite way of just catching up and hearing what has been happening in the lives of the members of WRT, especially since I had the great privilege of spending most of the winter doing a study sabbatical, apart from home and very much online with colleagues and friends and teachers and mentors. And as we walked, the trees were in bud, the flowers were in bloom, the air, though crisp and cold this morning, felt so very much alive. And during that time that I had the pleasure of being outdoors, I felt the spirit of the one whose breath is in us, that animates all living things, breathing through me, through the world. And that, I think, is why it's important after our Friday night prayer acknowledges the God of creation, that we join our voices in unison, sing Shema, recognizing that although we think of ourselves as separate, maybe even more so now than ever before, living lives of isolation and lockdown, we are in fact one as God is one. Join us as we sing together.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu,
So if you haven't put it together yet, the theme of tonight's service is life, Chai. Chai Society Shabbat. And I was reflecting as we prepared to sing Yichamota on the journey of our Israelite ancestors, the ones who gave us this song. They had just emerged from the perils of slavery, but even more. They had emerged miraculously from what they believed to be certain death. The escalating plagues culminating in the mass death of every firstborn human and beast. And yet our people survived. And isn't this the Jewish story? Time and time again, as we were so very much in the clutches of death itself, somehow we came out chai, living, alive, grateful, Nicham. Please take a few moments in your own way, whether you prefer to stand, sit, do Hebrew, do English, pray quietly. Take these moments for silent reflection.
May the
Once again, Shabbat Shalom, and a very special Shabbat Shalom to those who are newly inducted into our Chai Society, having affiliated with Westchester Reform Temple for 18 years and more. So tonight is the long-delayed installation of the class of 2002. Those who joined our congregation more than 18 years ago are being celebrated tonight. We give you a very loving shout out, and God willing, next fall we'll all be back together in person to celebrate you, as well as the incoming next High Society class of 2003. That's actually the class to which Kelly and I belong, having come to WRT. This is hard for us to believe. Maybe it's hard for you to believe. In the summer of 2003. So we'll have a really big High Society Shabbat that we hope you'll join next fall. Once again, tremendous gratitude to the members of our congregation who invest their love in this annual ritual, and also in nurturing the goodwill of those members of longest standing affiliation. I don't call them old members, I call them members of good vintage. So tonight we talk about Chai. And I begin with the observation that many ubiquitous Jewish practices have obscure origins. Take, for instance, the eating of hamantashen on Purim, a custom nowhere discussed in the Torah, the Talmud, or even the Book of Esther. Rather, it seems that hamantashen's association with Purim comes by way of a pun, and not a particularly good pun at that. From the medieval German cookies known as Mundtaschen, or poppy pockets. Mund, poppy seed, and taschen, pockets, which I guess kind of sounds like Hamantashen, which I guess kind of sounds like the wicked Haman or Haman. Or take the ubiquitous custom of reciting your loved one's names on your side, the so-called Kaddish list. Not only is this custom nowhere described in the classical literature, it even seems to have provoked the consternation and disapproval of a great many rabbis, some of whom around the 10th century tried to outlaw the practice, barring communities from reading the names of their dead. These rabbis likened the custom to consulting the spirits of the dead, which the Torah directly outlaws as idolatry, and in this week's Torah portion, as a matter of fact. Only after much stern letter writing, most of which went totally ignored, did the opposing rabbis finally relent, conceding that maybe our loved ones before Kaddish had in fact become so popular and widespread that it was no longer a fringe custom, but rather a mainstream Jewish practice, and so it remains 1,000 years later. And here's one more for us to consider on this Chai Society Shabbat, which is the wearing of a Chai medallion. Now, as you know, the word Chai means living or alive, and technically not life, although that's how it's usually translated. Life in Hebrew is the plural form, Chaim. On Chai Society Shabbat, WRT recognizes congregants who have affiliated with the temple for 18 years and more, and who are, despite it all, very much alive. 18 being the numerical value of the Hebrew word Chai, comprised of the two letters Chet, the 8th letter of the alphabet, and Yud, the 10th letter of the alphabet. And this, as you well know, is why Jews tend to give monetary gifts in denominations of 18. But have you ever considered the custom of wearing a chai as a piece of jewelry? Wearing a chai necklace is as Jewish as gefilte fish and rubber, two other customs with obscure origins, ask me some other time. The prominent display of a chai around the neck has also become something of a pop culture shorthand for overtly Jewish, especially in Hollywood, where the larger the medallion, the more shiny the gold, always gold. The more unbuttoned the lapel, and more hirsute the torso of the wearer, the better and the more Jewish it was so it would seem. In fact, Canadian rapper Drake has shown off his Jewish pride and his hairy torso by wearing a prominent tie during his publicity shoots. It has even spread beyond the Jewish people to include some celebrity tie wearers who adopted the practice perhaps out of emotional affinity for Judaism, or maybe for good luck, or as a cliff-to-day fashion statement. These include late period Elvis Presley, who never met a piece of bling he didn't didn't like, and Baseball Hall of Famer Rod Carew, who had a Jewish wife and kids, but who never himself converted to Judaism. In any case, nowhere in the Torah, the Talmud, or the Midrash do we find any mention of wearing a chai. The Forward's resident linguistics columnist posits that wearing a chai as an amulet around the neck probably originated only as recently as the latter half of the 20th century, possibly arising from a belief that the word chai would confer upon the wearer some kind of life-saving or protective benefit. That is to say, it's a superstition. Even the custom of venerating the word chai itself may be as recent as the 18th century, which in Jewish historical terms is recent indeed. There is a reason, however, that our tradition lionizes certain words and phrases, among them chai and shalom and Shema Yisrael, as well as certain nonverbal symbols and images like the Magen David, the Star of David, the menorah, and even the Hamsa, which is a good luck charm whose origins go all the way back to ancient Mesopotamia, pre-Israelite. These utterances and images function as powerful reminders of what our religious tradition values, whether it's the light of sacred service in the ancient temple, the menorah, or the value of simply being alive, the word chai. And as it turns out, our tradition's fascination with chai originates in a verse from this week's Torah portion, Acharei Hiroshim. That verse, Leviticus chapter 18, verse 5, reads as follows: Ushemartem et chukotai v'et mishpatai asher yaseh otam ha'adam v'chai bahem ani Adonai. You shall keep my laws and my rules, by the pursuit of which a person shall live. I am Adonai. The straightforward idiomatic sense of these words seems clear enough. You should live by the laws of God, where the words live by simply mean follow or observe. But the rabbis rarely stuck to straightforward idiomatic meanings of anything, and it is the specific use of the word chai, as in v'chai bahem, that a person should live by the rules of Torah, that the Babylonian Talmud expounds as signifying that the laws of the Torah are specifically designated for the purpose of living and not for dying. So this gets explained by an 18th century rabbi from Morocco, fittingly known as the Or HaChaim, meaning the light of life, after his popular commentary on the Torah. And he explains that the point of including these words v'chai bahem and live by them is that if a Jew is forced to violate one of God's commandments, it is better to violate a commandment than to accept martyrdom and death. That is to say, with very few exceptions, it is always preferable for a Jew to save a life, his, hers, or someone else's, than to accept death. Judaism does not encourage us to become martyrs for our faith. A meaningful contrast, perhaps, to Christianity and Islam, both of which have prominent pro-martyrdom themes and sects running throughout their tradition and history. Consider Jesus the ultimate martyr for his faith, in one way of looking at things, and the central role that martyrdom plays in Christian art, iconography, literature, and belief. And you can detect a stark contrast with Judaism, where in general martyrdom is frowned upon. The Talmud goes on to say that a person may violate any and all of the mitzvot in order to save a life, with the exception of the commandments forbidding murder, sexual crimes, and idolatry. So in general, Judaism prefers its faithful to live by their faith, not to die by it. Thus, v'chai bahem. And further, Judaism insists that our obligation to life almost always exceeds our obligation to law. Take, for instance, our frequent admonition not to fast on Yom Kippur if doing so might jeopardize one's health. And yet, every year, people unwisely choose to fast, even at great personal risk. I assure you yet again that halakha, Jewish law, would prefer you full but alive to hungry but dead. Judaism is a tradition of life, and its life-affirming commandments are for living. Judaism teaches that every day we are alive is a day to do mitzvot, a day to do a little good, a day to leave the world a little bit better. Every day, that is an exercise in affirming and sustaining life. And this year of pandemic living, this turbulent year of injustice and unrest, has for me underscored the relevancy of our verse, Achai B'Hem, which conveys Judaism's insistence on the preciousness of life and the priority of the Jewish obligation to safeguard it. And that is why, from a Jewish perspective, the threefold guilty verdict in the trial of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd strikes me as so significant. Above all, this verdict affirmed what Judaism has been saying all along, that each life carries intrinsic, infinite worth, that each life is immeasurably precious in the eyes of God. This same tradition proclaims in the Talmud that one who snuffs out the life of another has murdered a world entire, and that one who saves one life has saved the world entire. And so when we affirm, as the Torah does in its very first chapter, that humankind is made in the divine image, it means that we are committed to the precept that Black lives matter as much as everyone else's lives. When we affirm that humankind is made in the divine image, it follows that to destroy the life of one is to desecrate the God of all. It also follows that God's image on earth can never be fully realized, our human potential never fulfilled, our uniquely American sins, wounds, and traumas originating in Black slavery never remedied, never healed, until we come to experience the justice that was rendered on Tuesday as the ordinary course of events in a world that would put Chai at the center, in a world that venerates life, in a world that urges every human being to live, to thrive, not merely to exist, but to live, to elevate the act of living to an art, to infuse life with joy and purpose and transformative power. Judaism does not espouse a laissez-faire attitude about matters of life and death. Judaism does not think that one Black man suffocated beneath the knee, and far too many other Black men and women, boys and girls, dead at the hands of law enforcement is just a problem for Black people or communities of color. Justice denied one is justice deprived all. One life murdered is a world destroyed. And Judaism does not consider 2 million dead to COVID, more than 500,000 of them are fellow citizens, an acceptable trade-off for stubbornly insisting on business as usual. These are extraordinary times, my friends, that demand an extraordinary commitment to Chai. And Judaism would also admonish us that it did not have to be this way, that it still does not have to be this way, with the dead and the dying piling up, even as the vaccine stockpile gets used up, with still too many of our fellow citizens dying day by day in mass shootings, even as our elected officials sit on their hands, with still too many people who have reason to fear law enforcement more than to revere, conditioned by experience to believe that the firearm intended to protect lives will instead rob them of theirs. With still too many of these same people, many of them from communities of color, among the most likely to get sick and suffer and die as the pandemic continues to rage. Judaism would Judaism would command us in every instance to take the words Achai B'Hem and live by them as if our lives depended on them, because they do. So that beautiful Chai around your neck may show off your Jewish pride, but it won't save your life or anyone else's. If we really want to save lives, and if we really want to show what it means to be Jewish, there are things we can do right here and now. Continue to follow public health guidelines. Continue to fight for sensible legislation to curb mass gun violence. Continue to stand up to make sure that the Chauvin verdict will not be the only one of its kind. Continue to remember that this verdict provides accountability for a single crime, not justice for a battered population, much less a solution for the broken system. We can continue to give tzedakah, give food, give blood, give facts, give life-sustaining assistance to support the needy whose lives have become even more perilous during the pandemic. And we can continue to put the health and safety of others, particularly the more than half of your fellow citizens who are still unvaccinated, at the forefront of every consideration. We may understandably give thanks to God for the so-called gift of life, but every day we are alive, the responsibility for life, the responsibility to preserve, prolong, and promote what life is in our hands. As it is written, this day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life so that you and your children may live. Life is not only a gift from God, life is a choice that God charges us to keep choosing steadfastly and unceasingly for ourselves, for every other human being made in the divine image, this day and every day. Amen. It is a life-affirming and life-sustaining blessing to know that there are many in our midst joining us digitally tonight who have sustained the life of Westchester Reform Temple for now 68 years. Westchester Reform Temple was chartered by 8 families who convened at Willie Midland's house on Bickle Road in Scarsdale in April of 1953, so 68 years ago this month, and then officially joined the Union of American Hebrew Congregations in September of 1953 with the ability not only to educate children, as was the original intention of the framers and founders of Westchester Reform Temple, but also to pray and worship and celebrate life and celebrate being proud of being Jewish in Scarsdale, which, by the way, was not something that would have been taken for granted in the early 1950s. And so for all of you who have given life to Westchester Reform Temple, especially those who are part of our Chai Society, having belonged to WRT for 18 years and more, we acknowledge you, we thank you, and we bless you. If you are joining as one of our Chai Society members from home and would like to stand to be acknowledged while we sing a little bit in recognition of the way in which you bring so much joy and vitality to our community and our congregation, you can do so now. Starting with those who are founders of our congregation, I see you, Judy Weinberg, and those who are of our founding generation. That basically means that if you remember the 1960s at WRT, or if you were part of our congregation in our first 10 years of life, between 53 and 63, you can stand. We also want to acknowledge our double and triple time members of the congregation who have been part of our beautiful community for decades upon decades. Thank you for all you do to fulfill the meaning of V'chai, to live by the sacred precepts of the Jewish tradition. And tonight, I'm very pleased to announce the new inductees to our Chai Society who joined in 2002. We officially welcome to this august assembly our members Stuart and Lisa Alprin, Matthew and Lisa Boxer, Ray and Amy Cooper, Chris and Michelle DeLong, Sandy and Leslie Dubner, Josh Frankel and Joe Cutler, Beth Gilman, Richard and Colleen Gray, Jeffrey and Ronnie Hirsch, Mark and Tracy Jaffe, David and Melanie Landau, Stephen and Clarissa Lefkowitz, Douglas and Harriet Racklin, Bruce and Ivy Rader, Chris and Karen Beback, Larry Rogers, David Rosenberg and Jessica Lackland, Ira and Elaine Rosenstein, Bill Sherman and Diana Simon, Dan and Allison Singer, Kenneth and Vivian Sklar, Brandon and Mara Steiner, Michael and Lisa Sussman, Doug Euline and Elizabeth Basson, Jeffrey and Jennifer Underweiser, and Robert and Sherry Wiener. And anyone whom I have inadvertently left off the list, please accept my apology. You belong here too. We celebrate you, we thank you, we can't wait to be in person with you next fall as we will officially bring you up on our Bima and bless you and have a good time together. Also, welcome the very special to my heart class of 2003, the High Society. It's 2021 right now, but we're going to wait until the fall to celebrate our members who joined in 2003. Character.
And it is my honor now to bless you with an Israeli take on a classic song. These are the words of Bob Dylan's Forever Young, translated into Hebrew with a new melody by the Israeli composer Ronnie Klein.
That was nice. Thanks, Cantor, thanks, Pete. And a special thanks to a group of volunteer members of Westchester Reform Temple who coordinate our High Society Shabbat, who seem miraculously to remain forever young, and who keep us forever young. To you, Joanne Citrick, Barbara Moss, Jane Roberts, Charlotte Siegel, and Steve Siegel, thank you. Thank you for the gift of your Chai that keeps us alive. We also acknowledge in a moment that is a bit of a poignant and painful pivot, the many in our midst who are sick and who lie on beds of illness or pain, who yearn for healing, whose lives whose chai indeed feels precarious and fragile. And so we will ask you in our congregational midst to think of or share aloud names of loved ones for our Misha B'Rach prayer of healing, as we from the Bima name these: Matthew Atwood, Melech, Stephen Blackman, Anthony and Elizabeth Decker, Mordechai Ben Yaakov, Ravi Koran, Norman Goldberg, Georgette Nussbaum, Deborah Kapnick, Nicole Schusse, Neil Glasgow, Joshua Gamble, Leah Greenspan, Andrea Reiner, Chaim Ben Sephora, Masha Batsora, Aviva Baez Escabela, Dan Sokolov, Jeff Millman, Ken Master, Chava Batsara, Eliyahu Chaim Ben Fredo, Sheila Freed, Tanya Romanoff, Yitzchak Yona Ben May, Malka Sephora Basrako, Tamar Bat Malka, Heshel Meir Ben David Chana, and Howard Cat. If you are able and so moved, we invite you to rise as we offer Alleluia.
Alleluia, Shabbat Evening La Tehi La Rotzebreshi, Shelo Asanu Pigoya Ratzon, Velo Samanu Pirishakot Adama, Shelo Samna Kirukahem, Vego Ravinu Kehol Amonam, Anafnu Korim, Umishkavarim Uhodim, Lifnei Melech, Malchei Hamlakim, Akadosh Baruch Hu, V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech kol haaretz, Hayom hahu yeh Adonai echad, U'shemo echad.
In the midst of life, we are indeed in death. Our loved ones who died at this time of year, in years gone by, or who have been taken in recent days, the countless, perhaps nameless to us, who have perished in the COVID pandemic, the so many men and women and boys and girls who have lost their lives in senseless acts of gun violence, or before they were able even to be adjudicated by a trial, rather at the hands of law enforcement. For all of them, we acknowledge their deaths. We pray for their loved ones, and we give thanks for the blessing of life, theirs and ours, and for the memories that sustain us and the world. We will now acknowledge the mourners in our community by asking you to rise in the following order. If you are within the first 7 days of remembrance for a loved one, would you please rise? Those who are within the first 30 days of remembrance, please rise. If you are within the first year of having laid to rest a loved one, please rise. And if you are observing a yard site tonight, please rise. We stand with you, all of us, in sympathy, in fellowship, in love, and in affirmation of the preciousness of life. As we name those taken most recently, David Foreman, father of Marty Foreman, Diane Hallenbeck, mother of Lizzie Sturman, Steve Brooks, and Sean Hallenbeck, Herbert A. Newman, father of Peter and David Newman, Nathan S. Dayan, cousin of Cheryl Spivak Braun, Ellie Ellis, wife of Bob Ellis and grandmother of Jesse and Lindsay Lyman, Judith Marty, sister of Michael Simberhoff, Marsha Cohn, mother of Nathaniel Cohn, Lawrence Fahrenbaker, father of Larry Fahrenbaker, and Rabbi Michael J. Cook, and those whose yard site we commemorate on this Shabbat, Joan Alden, Joel Amerling, Ann Auspitz, Edward Blackman, Mitchell Brucker, Albert Shadroff, Brian Cohen, Charles Cohen, Anna Cron, Nancy Damashek, Philip Goretsky, Erwin Ellman, Jack Feinsilver, Renee Feinsilver, Martin Fife, John Franklin, Barry Freiman, Oscar Glickman, Ted Gluck, Evelyn Goldberg, Harriet Goldberg, Joan Mark, Herman Golden, Mildred Goldstein, Robert Hahn, Charles Herman, Jacob Hyatt, Ray Jarrett, Philip Kestenbaum, David Z. Johnson, Bud Capel, David Corrick, Martha Warner, Marvin Meth, Lillian Goldman Michaels, Marie Nelson, Ruth Wertner, Marsha Puletz, Nancy B. Raisin, Norman Ryan, Rita Roseman, Gertrude Schwartz, Shepard Shapiro, Morton Seashore, James E. Siegel, Muriel Sturman, Stuart Sunnis, Arnold Weissman, Isaac Weissman, and Stella Zelaznik. If you would like to offer additional names for commemoration, or if I have inadvertently mispronounced the loved one's name, kindly speak them at this time. And join me as we recite the sustaining and life-affirming words of the Mourner's Kaddish. Yikadal Yitkadash Shemei Rabba, Yom Divrachim Te Yom Dichmalchute, V'chayechon U'vyomechon U'chayecho Beit Yisrael, V'agala U'izman Pari, Yimru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabba V'arach V'elam V'amei Yiparach V'yishtabach, V'yipar V'yitomah V'yinaseh, V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalah, Shemei Kudusha, Richu. Elam Mikol Birkata B'shirata, Tushkachata B'nechemata, Da'amiram B'yama V'yimru Amen. Yehei Shalom Rabba Minshama, V'chayim Aleinu V'yalkol Yisrael, V'yimru Amen. Osei Shalom B'nomav V'yasei Shalom Aleinu V'yalkol Yisrael, V'yimru Amen.
Ose shalom b'roma, uyase shalom, aleinu ve'al Yisrael, ve'yimeru, amen.
We might be seated. Just a couple announcements. I'm going to focus on one in particular, but before we talk about next Friday night, we'll talk about tomorrow. Please share Shabbat with us and our community. I think we have an in-person sharing Shabbat as well as a simulcast over Zoom. So please join sharing Shabbat at 10 a.m. tomorrow. And at 9 a.m. you are also invited to log on for our weekly Torah study as we dive even more deeply into this week's fascinating and rich double portion offering to Roshim. That's 9 to 11 online tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, we celebrate the Bat Mitzvah of Julie Scheffler, and the congregation of WRT extends a heartfelt mazal tov to Julie and the entire Scheffler family. And in the afternoon, we will celebrate the Bar Mitzvah of Zachary Kirshner, and we extend our warmest mazal tov to Zachary and the entire Kirshner family. There are many things happening at WRT, and I know people are talking about getting back to normal. I prefer to talk about entering the new normal. And so, slowly but surely, we are entering the new normal that will include you in person at Friday night worship. So So next Friday night, we invite you to come to Westchester Reform Temple to enjoy Shabbat with us. It also happens to be our observance of Lag BaOmer, which is the one happy day in the midst of 7 weeks of kind of spiritual drudgery. More on that next week. If you come next week, you'll learn what Lag BaOmer is. We're going to have some beautiful music, wonderful art togetherness, some teaching and story sharing, and a bonfire, which is actually a very widespread, long-standing Israeli tradition for celebrating Lag BaOmer, this beautiful mid-spring festival day. That takes place at 6:15 on our WRT campus. We are still going to be simulcast streaming into your home, so you can continue to join us on our streaming platforms. We, however, have a fairly regimented sign-up process and values that inform that process. So we urge you to read the emails that have been coming this week and which will be repeated in the coming week very, very carefully so that you can think about whether or not coming to services is the right thing for you and when and how to do it. Our sign-up process takes place online. It is intended to be inclusive, safe, and equitable. So that means that there's a little bit of first come, first serve, but there's also a little bit of people who are commemorating a yard site or celebrating life cycle events such as a weekend bar mitzvah or bar mitzvah are going to be given a little bit of a priority admittance to the sign-up. However, if you don't get into the service next week and you really, really want to, you just didn't sign up quite on time, we have the ability for you to stay on campus and watch the service being streamed in a safe and comfortable way, or you can go home, stream it from home, and then you're going to be given a little bit of a bump up on the roster for the next week's service, provided you're able to make it. And if it seems a little bit daunting, a little bit bewildering this coming Friday, just keep at it, because our intention is to provide in-person Friday night worship in a safe, comfortable, and equitable way every Shabbat, every Friday evening at 6:15, starting next week, April 30th, and continuing throughout the spring and the summer, conditions permitting. By conditions, I mean weather. If the weather gets inclement, we have the ability to come into the sanctuary safely. You can't see this, but the sanctuary is actually open for high holiday capacity right now. So we can fit a lot of people in the sanctuary, like 70, but it still is going to be limited. Or by COVID conditions. So if the public health scenario changes not for the better, but for the worse, and we're monitoring it day by day, and we have an incredible reopening task force helmed by 3 physician advisors. If they advise that we have to be a little bit more strict in our position, we promise to inform you. Because our number one goal, if you didn't figure it out already from my remarks tonight, is l'chaim, that our Judaism should be for the living and should be about living. Okay, so that's the one announcement I wanted to share with you because it would take me a while to explain how and why it's working the way it's working. But you have to look at your weekly Thursday e-blast and many other communications that we send, including our website, www.temple.org, if you want to know all the things that are happening both in person and online. Cantor. Shall we do a little bit of kitchen mosey? It's been a long time since we've done this. Okay. So if you at home have a glass of a little bit of the sweet fruit of the vine, I'd like to lift it up with us. And if you have joined us as part of our High Society tonight, especially, or in our Zoom room, you'll be welcome to stay on for digital Ome and collation together. It would be great to see one another's faces. Please join us for the show.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei eri hadaper. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'latzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho v'yahavah u'ratzon yuvilanu, zikaron le'maaseh bereishit. Kibuyot tefillah lemikra'ei kodesh, zefer litziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta, v'yotanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha, v'yavah
Shalom. We join together in giving thanks for the life-sustaining blessings that come from the food we eat, the community that we create, and the God who sustains all. Baruch Adonai Elohim echad, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.
Shalom, Shabbat Shalom.